Morning, folks. Well, I think we'll get started. So we're actually not too bad on timing. So the session's going to be about an hour. Three great experts today, but I'm just going to start off with what is the single biggest risk in cybersecurity right now? So you'll all have a view, yeah? My view, and it's an informed view, is it's not the attackers, of which there seems to be a lot. It's the illusion that somebody else is looking after the cybersecurity problem. So the illusion that somebody else has responsibility or is taking responsibility, or they think it's somebody else's problem, that's actually where the biggest risk is. And that illusion is built on an outdated model. If you think about the way people have acquire, procure cyber, it's let's look at these features, let's buy this product in, tick the box, we're sorted. And that's not right. And it's, if you're thinking from the business's perspective, when they look out, they're looking at cloud provider. I've got an MSP, I've got the vendor, I've got my in-house team, I've got my compliance. So the responsibility appears to be split across all of those. Each bit's taken a bit. Well, that's a bit of the puzzle I have. That's a bit of the puzzle I have. But they're missing the fact that it's who owns the whole piece. And that's I guess, why the evolution of MSSPs has moved forward. So I don't think we're there yet with MSSPs. I think we're all on a journey. But a big part of that is we need to be clear with the businesses as to why and what an MSP can actually bring to their business. So what the buyers are saying, I guess what the customers are saying is, particularly in that kind of mid-market and enterprise, I know we'll have a lot of, let's say, smaller micro businesses, and they just need a lot of help, but their voices maybe isn't as strong. But if you get into that mid to large enterprise, they've had enough of buying tools that they don't actually use, or they don't know whether they use or not. They've got dashboards, brilliant dashboards, don't understand them. What is going on with all these dashboards? Too much information, you know what, park it, don't care. Then they've got reports coming in every month without any meaningful information. So they don't know, are we any better off? Are we still at risk? There's lots of people trying to get in, but where are we really at? And then worst of all, when something does go wrong, and they go, brilliant, and they point to the service provider, and the service provider goes, it ain't me. I'm not responsible. You're not paying me enough for that. You were clear, or you weren't clear, or we weren't clear when we started this about where that responsibility actually lay. So that journey to MSSP is from product to service provider to trusted partner. And that's the only way this is going to be, because this is now a board issue rather than a line item on an IT guy ticking a box and going, this is just something that we're going to buy, and I've got a budget every year to buy that, and let's go and do that. These are actually board level decisions. Now, I'm not going to talk about Marks and Spencer's or the Co-op, because everybody else is going to be talking about all that stuff. But that's when it comes home, when you then start to compare and go, well, what would happen if that was us? And then you just go, it's too big to think about. So what you need is, and as we always do, so if you think about it in the plumber scenario, right? If you've got a leak in the house, you want that 24-hour plumber. You want somebody to recommend, give me a plumber that can get here and sort this leak out. You don't want somebody saying, well, I didn't put the pipes in. It ain't my fault that it's leaking. And then, meanwhile, your house is flooding. You want somebody who's going to be there. It shouldn't happen in the first place. If it does, get the leak so that it doesn't become a business problem, i.e. your whole house is flooded and we've nowhere to go. So the acceleration of MSSPs has been driven by not just the IT guys wanting a solution or this sexy feature. And you're going to have the chance to see all of the features, all of the technologies. Part of that challenge is it's overwhelming. So me as a semi-layman in this is looking at that and going, where would you even start? Because there's so much overlap. Well, if I buy this one, but it doesn't do this, so I'll buy this, and it kind of overlaps with that, and I've got all of this and all of this doing the same thing, but to get this bit in the middle, that's just fram ahead. So and it's not my job, and I'm not informed enough. So what do I need? I need a trusted advisor, a partner who's going to say, look, we're in this together. Don't you worry about all that technology. We'll put the right technology in. to deliver these business outcomes. You know, to stop it from happening, or if it does actually happen, we're going to be able to get you back again. We're going to be able to restore, protect, and keep your business going, because all the rest of it's just noise. Nobody cares about IT until it's down, it doesn't work, or it's risking the business. And that's the truth. So we'll hear a wee bit about, you know, insurance today, but cyber insurance is changing for sure. The underwriters are asking, it's not, do you have the tools in place? They're saying, who's running them? Who's monitoring? Who's reacting in real time? That's what they're asking. And they're not going to stop asking that, because guess what? These guys don't like risk. That's their business. So whenever they're looking at that, they're going to say, risk, I'll tell you what, I'm going to put it on you. I'm going to charge you a load more. Shouldn't have said that, I'm a camel. But a lot more to protect your business, because you're a risk to me. When I look at your profile and what you do and the risk around that financial transaction, yeah, we need to charge you an awful lot more, unless you can demonstrate to us that we're doing this right. And I promised I wasn't going to talk about AI, but only to mention AI in terms of, if you think it's prevalent in our world, think what it's like in the hackers' world. Because those guys are smart guys, they're tech guys, they're all over it. And what they're effectively doing is attacking us at a volume that we've never seen before. All the attacks were happening. Now they can do it relentlessly across multiple platforms, multiple times. So us as a business would see some stuff. Now here's a little bit of an example. This is tiny, right? But it's just, we've seen a trend. And it's when people join our business. So a lady's just joined the business, puts it on LinkedIn. I'm happy to work for Excel. Yeah, it's brilliant. Literally the next day, spoof email from the CEO. So she gets an email from Adele saying, I'm under a bit of pressure here. I need to get me some vouchers. And this whole thing about, you know, click here, spend this, whatever. Now, thankfully, that had happened to us in the previous time. And we thought, well, this is definitely a trend happening. And that's what they're doing. They're scanning LinkedIn to see who's putting up that job. They're very vulnerable. So if you're the new person getting into a business and the CEO or somebody senior is asking you to do some shit, you're not going to go, no. You're going to go, I want to impress. And off they go, you know. And that's just one tiny example. Now, our advice, which was good, was focus on the people within the business who are probably the biggest. Everyone will say that's the biggest risk, but people are a big risk. As in, if your guys on the inside are clicking stuff they shouldn't be and bringing problems into the business, you need to educate. So our guys know, and it was actually our guys that headed that off. Now, I was quite proud, because that action we took off the last one, which was where we're kind of caught with our pants down, was fixed, because the team were able to head that off. And I kind of went, that's great, but that's the one I know about. It's not the one that they clicked something and downloaded, or somebody, you know, we're changing our payment address and want you to pay this to this. And then suddenly, I'm at risk now because I've paid, and it was the customers going, oh, we didn't get the money, whatever happens to be. So I'm off on a tangent. Not when I said I wasn't going to talk about AI, but that's ironic, but there you go. And then procurement is shifting too. So, you know, that when the procurements are coming out, the businesses are now protecting themselves because they're being forced to. So they're asking harder questions. So if you try to do that on your own, then guess what? You won't succeed. As a business, actually selling into these businesses, you've got to be able to say, this is what we deliver on top of the product. Don't worry about the product. This is what, in terms of business outcomes. So the future of MSSP isn't going to be defined by the tech. It's going to be defined by the service and the value that you bring to that business. So the good news is, I'm going to shush now. I'm going to introduce you to some folks. I'm going to let you know who's talking today, just to give you a sense of that. So Gary Melvin, who's the CTO at Nostra, he's going to break down, and this is something we'll all probably know about, or be familiar with, why Microsoft 365 isn't as secure as we all assume. So because it's there and it's a constant, and we think it's brilliant. How could it go wrong? And it's probably being backed up by Microsoft. It's not, but it's safe, and it's on the inside, and we use it every day. So he's going to talk about why that may not be the case and how we can close some of those gaps to avoid the breaches. We'll be followed by Daniel Gary, who's the Director of Security at Future Range. And Gary's going to talk about making the case for getting protection back to the basics, get the fundamentals right. Let's not worry too much about the tech. Yes, tech's important, but things like MFA, patching, backups, that's where 90% of the threats originate. So he's going to focus on those bits and how you can get your house in order by simply doing it. A bit like the old football thing, if you break football down, it's a very easy game. One guy pass it to another guy, put it in the net sort of thing. It's when you start to overcomplicate it. So get the basics right and everything will come from there. And then finally, Dr. Claire Ryan from IDIS Protect, CEO. And she's going to look at the insurance bit. Okay, so the changing world of cyber insurance and why it's more of a strategic partnership rather than just a provider of a service into those folk. So I'm going to pass you over to Gary now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'll put on this little piece. So thanks for coming into our session today, guys. When I was asked about the future of MSSPs, one of the things about MSPs and MSSPs is that the industry is growing. More people are outsourcing IT. So of all the conferences I've been at in the last couple of months, the biggest thing is that there is more organizations outsourcing IT. We're outsourcing, and as part of that, the customer is expecting coverage on security. So whether you're a managed service provider or a managed service and security provider, the expectation is that you're going to be doing security. And that's probably one of the biggest things. Where we see the gaps for the most part is two areas. So 92% of cyber attacks at the moment and above start off in email. So that's why I'm kind of focusing on the Office 365. And for the majority of our customers, they're in either Office 365. I'd say 95% are Office 365. We have a couple of customers on Gmail, and typically they're migrating to the Office 365 suite just because of the productivity. It's hard to ignore. Copilot, Teams, it is a really good productivity suite. And there is a journey to the cloud at the moment. So everybody, if I look at an IT strategy for any organization, it's cloud first. We're moving away from on-premise applications. We're trying to get, from a security perspective, we're actually trying to get rid of what we call legacy debt. So it's having old applications, old servers. The cloud is seen as the place to go. But inherently, without turning on security in the cloud, the functionality is there. But if we do an audit, it's not always turned on. So today we're just kind of going to step through some of that. The cybersecurity landscape has completely changed, and COVID has been the biggest transforming factor for how we work. So now we have all our organizations are pretty much hybrid. If you want to keep your staff, you have to give them flexibility. So we have people in the office behind a firewall. We have people at home, probably not behind a firewall. So we have to kind of bring all of that together. 2025, David mentioned AI. I'm going to touch on it briefly. It's huge upheaval in the world at the moment, last year and this year. AI is the changing factor. We haven't seen the output of it just yet, but I've been talking to some of the biggest issues we've seen in the last year is around the compromise of SSL VPN across multiple firewall vendors. AI is at the back of that. So we've talked to firewall vendors. They're now being able to look at code. They're looking at different elements of it. AI is being used. So it's not fully used. It's definitely being used. Phishing attacks, AI, hugely used at the moment. And we're seeing that begin to evolve. So if we look at the first session this morning around the deep fake stuff, the ability for AI to craft a very good email that's going to look at like somebody's actual, how they wrote it, how they sign off. The days of actually looking at a phishing email and know straight away that actually is a fake is gone. So we're getting really smart people that would have said, I would never click on a phishing email, now clicking on phishing emails. And the protections in Office 365 out of the box are just not there. So we're kind of concentrate on that. Covered this morning in the first piece. Regulatory landscape is actually changing. So we got the DORA, which is for all our financial organizations. We got NIS2 directive coming into law later this year in Ireland. And then we got the AI Act. So we have a lot more regulation coming on us. And this is good. So we just need to keep ahead of it. So spoke a little bit about AI. So we've got AI assisted attacks where we are at the moment. we have to move to AI-powered attacks. So they're being used for reconnaissance, where they're used for looking at code, used for generating emails, but it's yet to actually come together. So we think over the next year, we have AI-powered attacks, and AI is both the challenge and it is the solution. So it's been used in all our platforms to counter it. So the challenge for email at the moment, and this is back to the fact that 92% of whether it's a ransomware attack, it's a phishing attack, it's a business email compromise, somebody transferring money from one account to the other, email is usually the source to get in. From the outside looking in, anybody can look up any domain and see where you're hosting your email. So you can see if you're on a Microsoft 365, you can send in an email, get a bounce back, you can see where it's coming from. There's an awful lot automation can do to check what an organization is using and the protections in place in order to send a specifically crafted email to that platform. Email can be spoofed. So there's stuff that can be done with DNS records, SPF, DMARC. But by default, email is a 1980s technology and before that hasn't changed very much. And it is inherently unsecure by default. Users love clicking on links. We have users click on links. The first thing they'll do, even if they're not expecting an email from somebody, they will drop in, click the link, open the document, give away a username and password, and they get an error and say, oh, that something happened there. They don't even report it. Trying to weed out the good from the bad is the challenge. People get very upset if they don't get their emails. So they're not worried about the 90% of the bad email that's been blocked. If one gets missed, then your organization, you could miss a very critical email that could lead to a challenge for the business. So it's trying to get the good stuff in, keep the bad stuff out, and keep everybody secure. That is the challenge. And it is the gateway in. So if a bad actor gets access into an inbox, they have a huge amount of information on the organization. Go through the inbox, go through the sent items. Office 365 probably, if it's not configured, will allow them to install an app to give them persistent access to that inbox as well. If they get access to the inbox, they'll probably get access to SharePoint, get access to Teams. So there's quite a lot. So the idea then is to keep them out of your email platform. If they come in via phishing, they get access to the mailbox, get access to the data. Probably also get the user to click on a link and install some other stuff onto a machine. Access to one machine will allow access to the whole network. So if a bad actor can get access to one machine, they can dump credentials on that machine. If an admin user has been logged onto that machine, they can get a hashed version of the password, use that to get access to a whole network. So one leads to another, which leads on. Credential stuffing, usernames and passwords. One of the things I've noticed in the last year is when a breach does happen, the amount of data that's in it. So 5 years ago, if a breach happened, you might have said 2 million email addresses were involved in the breach. Now it's 100 million email addresses. So the amount of data that's held on us and the amount of contact details that are out there is now, it's massive. A phishing platform, and the bad actors use platforms. They're not in there is platforms available for them. I'm not part of today, but they can suck that in. It'll do intelligence on the email address, see what platform they're on, what business they're in. There's a lot of stuff that can be done to make sure they're getting the right phishing templates. And then we've got man-in-the-middle attacks, which we're going to capture. We'll get in a little bit as well. But if there's vulnerabilities in the underlying system, if malware gets on, then that PC has given away access to the whole piece. So protecting the user, protecting email, that's why 92% of stuff comes in through email. There's a lot of stuff in Office 365. It's not turned on by default. Everything in Microsoft, when you buy it, is not turned on by default. You buy a server, install a Windows server, you have to harden it. So it's actually, you either have to turn stuff off or turn stuff on. With Microsoft, by default, it's set up for the many, but it's not secure by default. So if you go into Office 365, you have to turn quite a lot on. There's a lot of legacy support in Office 365, so everybody can work. Old apps will work, old SMTP. There's a lot of stuff that works by default. IMAP, POP, all of that stuff works by default. All that, to get a secure platform, there's quite a lot of work at turning stuff off. The good news is, if you're on the right license, that you have a huge amount of security. The bad news is you can have the right license, but unless you turn it on, doesn't offer you the protections. So we've got safe attachments, safe links. We've got quite a bit, but everything that you do turn on still doesn't give you everything you need. So it's a combination. So when we talk about cybersecurity, we talk about having multiple layers in place. So it's like bulletproof glass. The more layers you have, the less stuff they can get in. This is the most common thing we're seeing at the moment, is session token hijacking. So you can set up your users with MFA. So we consider MFA to be pretty much dead as a protection now for Office 365, because the new phishing platforms will allow you bypass MFA. The way it works is the user will get a link. There's a proxy server here that is between Office 365 and the user. The user will click on a link. It'll be brought to a page, looks like Office 365. They put in a username, put in their password, ask them for their MFA token because it's proxying through Office 365. That combination of username, password, and MFA token is converted into a session token, which lasts for up to 90 days, and they get access to that mailbox. And that gives you access. So your MFA piece has changed. So if we're reliant on strong passwords and MFA for Office 365, then it's only a matter of time before those users get breached. And that is the challenge with email, and that is the challenge, and we're always have a challenge in trying to keep that out. We have Defender, and we have Defender for Endpoint. If Defender for Endpoint is on, it's going to stop us getting to quite a bit. What I want to get to is one of the great things in Microsoft is the security score. So Microsoft gives us a nice platform in order to see how we're doing in terms of security. So it's broken into a couple of areas. We've got identity protection. We've got security controls around our data. We've got security controls around our device. And we've got security controls around our apps. Ideally, we want to get this up to 75% and above. Identity, to get that well, we need to have all our users in place, strong passwords. We've got MFA, but there's lots of conditional access policies that we'll talk about in a moment to enhance that. But ideally then, to get this above, we need to have Microsoft does a risk-based approach. If the user moves into the high-risk category by having the right licensing, while we sleep, we can have these users being locked down. So there's a lot of automation, and it's about trust, and that's evaluated. So if a user tries to log on in Dublin, within 2 hours they're trying to log on in America, the system knows this is impossible travel, it starts locking down the user. And that's where we want to get to. But out of the box, it doesn't do that. The data piece is around our documents and how we do our protect our critical information. That's usually the last one. The device is, if we have Intune and Defender for Endpoint, now we get a device score, and we can actually start making use of Office 365 and actually looking at vulnerabilities down on the device. The apps is an easy one. By default, the user is allowed to give permission to their data to an app. It shouldn't be the way it is, but it is the way it is, and having a score. But this thing, we love the Office 365 security score because it gives you a really good picture of where the organization is at. We go into organizations, and we took on a managed service customer only in the last month. Their score was 24. So this ranges from 24 up to 85. So this is something we recommend everybody should know and understand why we're not. We're at a 0 here on this one on data because we don't have any DLP, or there's no sensitivity labels in place. So as long as you know why it's not there, and it's part of a stream that's coming, then we're probably in a good place. Security score, easy to monitor, monitors devices, data, and applications, but the big one is identity, and it's always improving. So if you leave it alone, come back in a month, 2 months, it's actually probably going down. Lots of stuff around security score from identity. This legacy stuff, that's the stuff that needs to be turned off, making sure we've password policies, user risk policies. It's quite a bit in this, but it is actually really worthwhile doing. And we're doing this to make sure the user identity is protected. Security score for data, it's around data loss protection, encryption, access controls. This is it's a longer term thing to do. Identity can be locked down straight away. This needs work. It needs consulting with the business, see what our documents, see what sort of PII data we want to protect.
5 minutes.
5 minutes is good. Devices. So where we want to get to in Office 365 and our security journey journey in overall is around zero trust. So where we think we need to go to in Office 365, if we're using Intune and the whole full suite, we can start locking down access to your data only to trusted devices. And that's where we think Office 365 and access to data and email is a really important data. So we think you need to start moving to Intune and only allow organizational devices get access to your data. So if you have your platform set up that you have Intune on it, you have trusted devices, you can have your applications then SSO'd into Office 365, which is your identity platform. It means now you have to be on a trusted device with a trusted identity to get access to your corporate data. That's how you stop blocking out the bad guys, because otherwise you're actually playing catch up all the time. That's where we see pretty much everything going over the next while. And then compliance score as well. So if you have managing the endpoints and using conditional access, you're basically saying, unless this endpoint is part of my organization, it's fully up to date with Defender or any other AV product of your choice, and it's encrypted and it is kept up to date, then I can get access to my cloud apps. And that's the way we get to making it easier for ourselves. If you're not on the list then, or if your machine is not up to date, then you don't get in and you don't get access to the apps. If we don't do it this way, we're kind of chasing ourselves all the time, because of what we've seen at the moment is users are clicking on links, they are doing stuff. We are training users, but what we see coming down the line is more use of AI, more sophisticated attacks, and unless we change how we do stuff, then we're not going to be able to block it out. So continuous improvement is around zero trust, security score, regularly reviewing and implement the security posture, and pretty much keeping up to date. But we do see zero trust as the biggest piece that's coming, or else you end up chasing. That's everything from me.
Just going open up on the floor. Any questions?
I have a question for you, Gary.
Yeah.
On the, just kind of on smaller businesses,
Yeah.
seems to be a bit of a problem with getting them to buy into buying these tools.
Yeah.
You know? Like, for example, the secure score, if you want personally logins to play Entry P2,
Yes.
things like that. So what would you be recommending as roughly how much people should be spending per user to keep themselves secure at the moment? Because I think you got to set that. When you go into talk,
Yeah.
otherwise there.
So there's the security budget before there's an issue,
Yeah.
and there's the security budget after there's an issue. And what we find is we have those conversations sometimes, and then all of a sudden, do what you need to do. Why didn't you tell me I needed this before? So the user risk stuff is all based on an Entra P2 license. Now there's a newer license, the Entra Suite. So what we recommend is the Business Premium plus the Entra Suite, because the Entra Suite actually does secure. So we've two elements to protect. We have to protect the people working from home, and the Entra Suite does that because it does a lot more web filtering. It does a lot more security, and I think the P2 is like €8 something. The Entra Suite is 11. So for the difference of €2, and there's a lot of compliance functionality as well. So a business premium, and that is the choice. What we find with customers, and the biggest thing I've got from customers in the last couple of years is, why didn't you tell me stronger? I've told you, but why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you explain it? But the amount of stuff that we see happening, but soon is growing. We have put the protections in place. MFA will be in place in the customer, and yet somebody clicks on the thing, gives away the username and password. They click on a link. The organization is compromised. They might get locked out, but they could be there for. We do session token timeouts. I didn't cover it here, but all our customers has a range of conditional access policies. So we limit session tokens to 8 hours. By default, it's something like 60 days. But that means they could be in there for 8 hours. So if they click on the link, they had MFA, they had geo block on, but if somebody comes in, and when an attack happens, we'll see it come in. The user gives away a username and password. We have geo block on for conditional access. We'll see them trying to get access, and then all of a sudden, after 10 attempts, we'll see them trying from Ireland, because they'll just VPN into Ireland and try there. If the session timeouts are on, it means they have access for 8 hours. You can do a lot in 8 hours in terms of getting access to data. You can pull all data out. So that's why we see that. But I think we just need to have the conversation with their decision makers, and that goes up to board. NIS 2 is going to help us a lot with that because it makes the board responsible. And the data breach, if they have to work through a data breach with the Data Protection Commissioner, there's a lot of questions. And under GDPR, which is our basic legislation, you need to have adequate controls in place. And I think we have to kind of step up those. That changes. So if we work with a regulator, they'll always speak about adequate controls. They don't tell you what you need because those adequate controls change over time. Yeah.
In the intro remarks, and the appendix you used, the premise that Microsoft 365 is not secure.
Yeah.
So, appropriately configured.
Very, if yes, very secure, and that is so. This is every Microsoft product, not just 365. It's out of the box to suit everybody, and that's to allow everybody to work. So it's done by default. They do, and they have the security score to guide you to where you need to be. But yeah, very secure. As a company, they've invested more than billions in terms of security in the last couple of years. Thank you, guys.
No. Hi everyone, thanks very much for coming to today's session, and thanks to Gary. It's a great presentation, Gary. My name is Daniel Gary. I'm the Cybersecurity Director for FutureRange, and today I just want to discuss some of the stuff that's already highlighted here today about just going back to basics and getting the basics and the fundamentals right for our customers. So I know for the last number of years I've been involved in a good few ransomware attacks now, or cyber incidents, or cyber breaches. And most of the time, what we're seeing is misconfigurations or very basic things being done wrong. So there is tools for everything, and there's a lot of technology, and if you go downstairs and walk around, it can be confusing. As an MSP or as an end user, you don't know which stand to go to, because they're all overlapping, so it gets confusing. But if we just take a step back and have a look at what we're trying to do as an MSP or as a customer. So one of the first things I would do is try to understand our customer and their data. So as a business owner, what's my risk? How am I profiling my risk? How am I managing my risk? So where is my risk? So my data is my risk. So that's the crown jewels, and that's what you're trying to protect. So if you got a file server on-prem or you got a SharePoint, how is that being controlled? What are the securities around that? Is it been audited? Who's accessing it? Can you detect if someone puts stuff on Dropbox, Gmail? We talked about data loss prevention there. There's many tools out there, but it's just knowing that. And what we're trying to do then is build a defensive wall around it. So it's like an onion, it's like Gary was saying, it's all about layers and building that defensive wall. And to be fair, a lot of MSPs and customers are getting there. They have the wall built. But unfortunately, over time, cracks appear in that wall. Or new projects have come in. They've moved from on-prem to cloud. Firewall rules have been changed. There's no new infrastructure on the network. So once that wall is built, we just need to monitor it. So we have asset inventory. Do we know all the assets out there? Do we have Intune? Do we know what devices are even out there? What are we trying to protect? Can we protect it? If we can't see it, we can't protect it. Software, firmware, firewalls, are they updated? Like every day of the week, there's zero trust coming out for every vendor. And it's hard to keep up with. So we've seen a lot of that with SSL VPNs, a lot of attacks I've worked on recently have been down to MFA not being enabled in SSL VPNs or enabled incorrectly. And once they're on the network, then, look, the vulnerability management piece is there. They can move laterally across the network. There's usually a lot of vulnerabilities, if you're not monitoring or patching correctly, that they can easily jump around the network and dump the hashes, and that's how they get across to all the devices. So the business content mapping is the piece I was speaking about, understanding your data, where it is, and what regulatory compliance you're complying to. So that's your GDPR, is in NIS 2, and the DORA Act. So this is the bit of talk about building the wall and your defense. So least privileged access, locking down as much as you can, and just removing RDP from the network. It's not needed. Is your network segmented? I've threat locker up here as it's one of the I don't know if many of you use ThreatLocker out there as MSPs or customers, but it's a fantastic solution for blocking a lot of the attacks that we're seeing. And we spoke about like security awareness training, and users are the number one entry point, clicking on that link. So once we have that wall built, we need to be in a position where we can detect. So the bad actors are scanning the network. They might dump a payload in and they'll come back to it a month later. They don't press the red button there and then. So they want to re-enumerate your network to understand how it works, what to charge you for ransomware, and what are you willing to pay. So they're trying to figure that out. So during that time, we need to be able to detect, is there any unauthorized access on the network, and how are we doing that? So your EDR, your MDR solutions, having a SOC and SIEM in place is invaluable to limiting the damage that's going to be done on your network, because they're going to get on your network. There's going to be a breach, so you have to assume breach and you have to prepare for it. And then your response piece then, this is key. So we have the technologies in place, but a lot of times when I go into organizations, I'm chatting to them, their instant response is not there. They haven't got it written down. They don't know who's responsible for it. And 9 times out of 10 is I'll ring IT. Okay, but there's a lot to it. There's who's going to contact the media, who's going to talk to the DPO. Do we have external parties that need to be involved? And this wastes so much time during an active incident. It really slows down the process. Having sessions like tabletop exercises, running through a couple of scenarios, really educates the decision makers and the board members. It's not just a case of, well, we have backups, we have SOC in the scene, it'll be fixed in a couple of hours. So this is key to get this part right. And in this is your business continuity plan, your disaster recovery plan, and around recovery. So this is the area that kills a lot of people. So the last 2 or 3 attacks that I worked in, unfortunately, the backups that were in place weren't sufficient, they weren't fit for purpose, or they weren't tested. So there has been an incident, we need to recover it, we need to rebuild from scratch. And unfortunately, because the backups haven't been tested, it now takes a lot longer. So this could be the case in Marks and Spencer's. I won't go into that, but there's examples over the years of this taking a long time. So even recently enough, I was working an attack, because there was no testing done in the backups, it took the customer over a week and a half to get back up and running, where it should have probably taken a couple of hours or a day or two. And it's really important. So if there's any business owners here today and or MSPs, I would urge everyone to just test your backups biannually, make sure you're happy with them, be able to show how long it's going to take to restore your networks, and just don't rely on, well, they are backed up, they're there, they're there, because that's not going to save you during an incident. Some of the critical controls that I'll just talk about here are, asset inventory, as I mentioned before, knowing what's out there, knowing your attack surface, how you're going to protect it, where your data is, who's accessing it, application whitelisting. So just locking down your network to business-only applications. You don't need a plethora of applications running in your network. I know it's a buzzword now, but it's zero trust, blanket deny, and if the user needs it, they put in a request. And 9 times out of 10, they will not put in that request, And I've seen it stop so many attacks, because the attackers like to live off the land. So when they're on the network, they like to exploit PowerShell, they like to call out to GitHub, and you need to have PowerShell for your systems to work, but PowerShell doesn't need to talk to the internet. ThreatLocker will stop that. PAM solutions, privileged access management. So a lot of third contractors are dealing with your network. They're usually given overly permissive permissions onto the network. You get an SSL VPN and they're on your network. So controlling that through a PAM solution, locking it down, recording the sessions, having the admin password rotated, it's key. And you have an audit trail there built in. Disable RDP doesn't need to be there. And your SIEM and SOC, immutable backups. So having immutable backups, having a cloud backup, having a local copy, having an isolated copy, and having that tested. And as I mentioned before, documentation, IR plans, or DR plans, business continuity plans. So went through that a bit faster now, but if there's any questions around that.
Can I ask, just on the mutable backup, then, that's probably one of the things that we feel people don't. They believe that all backups are the same. So I think in the ransomware attacks, the first thing that is attacked is the backup, so they can't restore. So it's probably worth just getting into the mutable backup a little bit and how it's different.
So the mutable backup is already encrypted, so it's already secured. So it prevents the bad actors or the threat actors encrypting that data. So it's a secure copy. And it's not the cheapest of solutions, but it is the most secure of your backups. I think you have Bullwall downstairs. You have a number of offerings there, who will provide this. But having just like a cloud copy that is immutable is so important during attacks, and also having your disaster recovery. Can you spin up your network onto a different platform, like Azure, like Datto? Can you spin it up while you're rebuilding on-prem? So 60% of the company can work away until you repair all the on-prem services. And at the time, I know we're talking about conversations and budgets, and I've been in front of CFOs, and that's the decision makers, and you're talking about these solutions, and they're not cheap, but they're invaluable. And once the attack has happened, it's a different conversation. Then the budget will be there. But I think if you do make a strong points for the strong arguments, you will get that budget.
So some things that are non-negotiable, is that a non-negotiable? If you were to put something on
100%. Yeah, 100%.
guarantee I can get this back. Is that one of the?
Yeah, and it gets more expensive then. So I've had these conversations, because the quicker you get your systems back up, or the backup service that provides that, the more expensive it's going to be. So sitting in front of CFOs and saying, right, we can have it back in 4 hours, or it could be a day or two, depending on what you want to spend here. So if your company can last a day or two, well then fair enough. But if you need it back up and it's critical mission, then it's 4 hours or whatever it needs to be. And it's the same, I've been in front of CFOs before, and when I first started with Future Range, and cybersecurity was kind of like a buzzword, they thought I was nearly going in for a sales pitch. But now the conversations are a lot easier, because they're responsible to the boards now. So the boards are asking the questions, and that's the feedback that we're getting. They're actually coming to us now for the technologies, like how secure are we, so the conversation has definitely changed over the last 2 or 3 years.
For companies with limited budgets, how can they focus on the fundamentals without feeling overwhelmed with a lot of stuff?
I think the good thing about cloud is that it's like the licensing. Edward asked a question about licensing. You're only paying per user, so it actually cost scales with the number of users you have. So even for the backup stuff, if there's a size, immutability, it's all there, but it's based on the size of the data and the number of users. So for small businesses, now 5 years ago, Siemens would have been the same. It's proportionally affordable. So I think that's a big thing that small businesses have yet to, because when we looked at it 5 years ago, the cost of a security solution was probably out of their reach. Yeah. Now everything is proportional to the user. It is way back in reach. Same way mutable backup. Everything Daniel has covered, I think, is available to the small customer as much as the big enterprise customer.
And just on that, David, so if I was a small customer, like you're trying to, like a security audit is a great place to start as well. Just try to identify the gaps on your network, and then you create a roadmap and create your budget. And the way the Microsoft stack has improved over the last years, there's a lot of consolidation to be done there. So there's a lot of systems that can be removed, and you can move more towards a Microsoft house. So when you're having conversations and the license has to be increased, there's a whole lot of other services that come with that, like your conditional accessing, your Intune, your SharePoint, your Azure. There's a drive, then it's a strategy drive for the customer. It's not just a license increase. It's moving them from on-prem to the cloud and all the advantages that cloud have. So it's more of a strategy conversation rather than you're going from €8 to €15.
I'm thinking to myself, suspicious of, the next license, I think it's a sales pitch to. You know what I mean? It's just sort of, I've got you now, I'll just keep using you for I guess this is a different piece now, because this is actually, it's the feature you don't see the benefit of every day. You get it. But it's still perceived probably.
It's just,
another.
it's an education thing for sure.
Yeah.
I suppose if I can maybe contribute to that, it all starts with risk. And if you have an open risk conversation with your client and framed around risk management and a problem, then the solution becomes apparent, and then they have to decide whether they have the funds to mitigate that risk or not. And then every single thing that we try to do within a business can be addressed through risk. And the CEOs refine the budget once they realise the risk that they've helped you identify or you've helped them identify. And what happens then is that they take ownership of it rather than us saying this. They just know the risk and it's their decision to fix it or to mitigate it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. If you go back to my first slide there around the identity preparation piece, you want to call it. You know, if you go into a company, you're trying to build a strategy or understand that risk. So you're risk profiling it. So you're asking where's your risk? So it's your data. So how is that secured? You know, and that could be, you know, through, okay, you've lots of VPNs, you've 13 or 14 stores coming back here. You know, how are they being secured? How is access being locked down? There's a lot of third parties coming in here doing work. So here's all the risk, and here's the controls that we need to put in around that. You know, so I think you're 100% right there. Like, and it's a lot easier conversation then. You know, but I do think there does need to be consolidation of the tech stack, though. Just you know. Okay. Cheers, David.
Stick us on. No, I know everybody else came with a jacket. Right, we'll stick it on. Grand. So that's a really good point there, talking about risk, because it brings on nicely to what I'm going to talk about. I know, it's fabulous. Is risk transfer and cyber insurance. So I am going to caveat this by saying I am not a broker, right? I'm not an insurance broker, but I do work quite a bit with some of the major cyber insurance providers. And I want to just kind of give you some insights into my thoughts about where cyber insurance is going to go, where your role as an MSSP or an MSP is going to sit in that, and how we can all make a bit of money, in my opinion, out of the other side of it in a slightly different way. Okay, so a wee bit of history, because if you're not familiar with cyber insurance, this will be lost on you. So I want to set a little bit of context around this. Okay, ironically, it's an insurance policy that's still in its infancy. Okay, first came out in 1997, and it used to be called Internet Security Liability Cover, right? AIG launched it, and this sounds a little bit mad, but it was in response to the growing rise of the use of the internet and e-commerce websites. And it was that whole idea that if you had an e-commerce website and somebody stole your data, they may as well have come into the office, take your customer list and cleared off, and therefore you were going to have a loss, a financial loss as a result of that. So they created this initial policy around that idea of protecting that financial loss. Now, cyber insurance has grown significantly and really enhanced just in the way that technology and the use of the internet has since 1997. And where it first began to come into mainstream was around 2016, 2017, when you've seen Petya and WannaCry and NotPetya come into the ecosystem. So all of a sudden, these large enterprise organizations were starting to actually have financial losses as a result of something that actually wasn't technically covered in insurance, okay? They were claiming off business interruption, for example, and that started to make the insurance industry think a wee bit about what was out there. The claims mushroomed, absolutely mushroomed in terms of the value to them. So we started to see more and more people switched on to going, right, if that happened to them and I lost that money, then where am I getting it from? So you mentioned about Marks and Spencer's and Co-op. If you were watching BBC Northern Ireland News last night, they would have told you that they reckon it's about 300 million for Marks and Spencer's. But not to worry, because insurance is going to cover some of this. Now, the insurance providers are probably in the toilet with diarrhea at that thought, because that's their loss ratios out the window, okay? And loss ratios is that balance about how much they get in from charging you for a premium and how much they're paying out for claims. See, back in 2016, 2017, 100% of cyber claims were paid. So if you had a policy and you needed to claim, they didn't ask you any questions, they just paid out the money, okay? And that was fabulous. Forget about it now. Not going to happen, right? 2018, we see GDPR come on the radar. All of a sudden, the law tells you as an individual, if someone loses control of your data, you can seek financial redress. Hands up, everybody starts to claim. It was like the whiplash scenario in health and safety, okay? Everybody realizes you can get a bit of money. They're all going to start to do it. So then companies started to look at their risk appetite again, and they think, right, well, we need protection against that, because if we lose 1,000 records or 100,000 records and we multiply that up by a small amount of money, we need something to come back. So you started to really see the adoption here of cyber insurance, and you start to see smaller businesses pick up on this, okay, and realize, actually, I need something in place if somebody comes along and hits me. Then we had COVID, and we had the whole explosion of ransomware, right? And it ran through everybody. And you had the highest number of claims lodged against cyber policies at that period of time, and the biggest losses to the insurance industry, because ransomware was a much bigger claim size by the time you did the recovery from that, and you started to clear out at the other side in the litigation around that. Now, this is when insurance companies started to wake up to what exactly was going on. And they started to realize here, hold on a minute, we shouldn't be paying out for everything. And a similar thing happened, actually, if you cast your mind back to COVID and bars and restaurants with the forced closures in the Irish government. FBD insurance covered a lot of them. And the bars and the restaurants put in claims against business interruption. And the insurance said, no, global pandemics are not business interruption, right? Even though the government wasn't allowing you to open up and there was nothing you could do. Now, vomiting and diarrhea was covered, right? So if you had an outbreak of vomit and diarrhea in your pub and or your restaurant, you had to close it, you could claim then, but not for a global pandemic. And a group of publicans took them to court, and actually the court ruled that no, the insurance must pay out, because you know why? They weren't explicit in the terms and conditions about what was not covered. Right? So you start to see a seismic shift in cyber insurance there. And the insurers start to call out actively what is not included, right? So they call out these exclusions. So if you have a business policy now as a result of this, you will notice that one of the things they call out is any losses as associated with cyber are not covered under this policy. You must have a standalone policy or take a bolt-on to add on to have any sort of cyber cover. And that term cyber losses is quite wide. Okay, a hardware failure, a cyber incident, a rogue employee does something out the other side of it, your social media gets compromised and you have brand issues as a result of that. It's quite wide. So now people are starting to actually focus a wee bit more on that. That was this whole idea about removing silent cyber. So where an IT-related or cyber-related incident could be claimed off, for example, your business interruption or your professional indemnity. Now, solicitors used to love this, right? Because there was €25,000 worth of cover on professional indemnity. That gets you diddly squat in terms of cyber. Like nothing. You would very rarely even get an incident response team for 25 grand. But they thought they had cyber covered. So now all of a sudden they're starting to realize, actually, I have to have a standalone policy. So what we start to get now is a very much more mature market in terms of what's going to be covered, what's not going to be covered, what level of liability is placed against those different elements in the policy, and you start to get people much more switched on to it. So when you mention cyber insurance, generally you get people going, ah, yes, right? Because if you're a broker, you're going, ah, yes, I can charge for that. And that's great. If you're a managed service provider, you're going, ah, yes, stupid forms for me to fill out another set of bloody questionnaires, right? And if you're an end customer, you're going, ah, yes, trying to screw more money out of me. But what people don't realize is this should be part of your cybersecurity risk strategy. And you should have someone in your organization who understands a little bit about it, because the policies are incredibly complicated to navigate. There's not one set of standard language. There's not one set of standard terms that actually come into play. Every bloody provider, all 690 of them across the globe, offer slightly different types of cover. The pricing ranges anywhere from 300 quid, okay, which is toilet paper, because there's nothing that policy is going to get you, to up to about 2 to 3 grand for a standard micro kind of small business. And the biggest one I've ever seen is a manufacturer who was quoted 120,000 for 3 million in liability cover. 120 grand a year. Okay, so the policies vary, and it really is no rhyme or reason at this moment in time in terms of what type of policy, what level of cover you get, or the price that comes back to it. But in general, there are 3 elements to any cyber policy. First party losses, protect you if you have a cyber incident. Think about your health insurance. You get on well, covers you. That's the type of cover that's in place. Third party liability covers. Your customers, should they have a direct loss as a result of you having an incident, it covers them. So think your car insurance. You bang into somebody, they get their car repaired, okay? And then you get these wraparound services. So they'll do sometimes incident response to you. Most of the policies will do about 25 grand, get you between 2 and 3 days of a dedicated incident response team from their list that'll actually help you come out and investigate and contain it, not recover. Investigate and contain, okay? You'll get some PR services and some legal advice services because you'll be reporting through to the DPO, etc. Anyone who does do any sort of incident response, or if you think you might dabble in it as a managed service provider, be switched on to this. You really should get the company solicitor to engage you so that that document remains as a privileged document. So if the solicitor requests for you to come in and start doing some analysis, that's a privileged document and you don't have to share it all out, which potentially can limit the litigation costs moving forward as a result of it, okay? As I said, all of these things are really, really useful, but you need to understand for your customer what they're actually buying. If they're only getting first-party coverage and they have contracts worth 15, 20 million, that's not enough, okay? Because they're third parties, those customers they serve, they're actually in breach of their own contract then as a result of that, okay? If there's only a small amount of incident responses is enough to deal with the complexity of that organization, can that be increased as a result of this? If there are active exclusions, what are they? So I seen a policy one time and it excluded any losses arising from invoice redirection and payments to the wrong account. But actually that was the biggest risk in that organisation because they had a revolving door in the finance office and staff were constantly turning over. So you couldn't be sure that that person was switched on to where that company is based and are they actually changing their bank details, etc. So they had a policy and if they had paid out 150 grand an invoice and lost it, they actually weren't covered out the other end of it. And this helps when you understand kind of what your customer is actively seeking. It helps when you complete those questionnaire forms that they actually issue out to you. What tends to happen is you get the form in, it might get done with one of the junior members of staff, etc. You tick off the boxes and say this is what they have in place, but you don't really hear anything back other than we've got the insurance policy. So you don't really know what type of cover has been in place and therefore what type of exposure you have and what the customer can cover for themselves. We're at a little bit of the ripples on the wave, and the wave is about to rise on this idea about cyber insurance. Now, the adoption rates, believe it or not, for small businesses are around 10 to 15% here in Ireland. For larger enterprises, you can go up to 25 to 30% of companies who will have a policy in place. In the United States, some of the states there, organisations will have 80% adoption on cyber insurance, and it's because they're just switched on to suing each other and litigation costs. They understand they need to transfer that risk out the other side of it. But there is a driving force behind cyber insurance now coming into place, okay? If you're looking to tender for any sort of public work, you'll see that there is a requirement now to have cyber insurance in place. I looked at a tender the other day, it was for Wi-Fi in an organisation. It was 1.9 million over 10 years, so, 190 grand a year essentially. They wanted 5 million in liability cover on a cyber policy. 5 million in liability cover is going to cost you between 20 and 30,000 to secure. Right? So when you're factoring in going, this looks a juicy tender, is it really? Understand what they're actually asking for. Do you need 5 million in liability cover for Wi-Fi? You know what I mean? Like it's not a huge kind of thing that you're putting into place on it, but you're starting to see it now. So even smaller organisations and micro organisations who are looking to tender, you're trying to have that conversation going, you need to allow a bit in your budget. It's not just the licensing the product, you need to make sure you have this policy in place as well. You're starting to see it in the supply chain requirements, so everybody wants to know who they can sue if they have a cyber incident and who they can pass it on to there. So in this too actually says that you have to check and see whether your suppliers have this in place so you don't have interruption to the supply chains. And you're definitely beginning to see it now in the regulatory and compliance side of it. It's very much likely going to feature in the Cybersecurity Resilience Act in the UK as well, about this level of having cover in place. With the idea of being able to maintain things. So now all of a sudden lots of people are talking about cyber insurance, right? But where is the opportunity for you as managed service providers? Because this has to work in our favour, guys, right? This, to me, is my idea about this. Stop selling support, start selling strategy, right? Because we're not just about licenses. This is a bigger piece for an organisation. No offence to the brokers that are out there. They have no true understanding of cyber risk and what that organisation faces to be able to advise them on the type of cover that they need to put in place. They issue out a form and all they're concerned about is, right, is the cover taken out and do I get my payment back on it? I actually think that cyber insurance should be a product that managed service providers sell as part of their suite of solutions, okay? And I'm actively pulling together a group to lobby for this, right? So I'm down in stand 39, come and hunt me out if you want to be part of it. But if you're understanding and doing the risk assessment, and then you're providing the controls, and you understand the level of interruption that that business is going to face, and you understand how quickly you can get them back, why should you not be the person that helps them to transfer the remaining residual risk over to the insurance provider and understand what comes into play with this, okay? At the minute, those forms that you fill out from the insurance providers are setting down this great holy idea of what should be in place. When you have a small business that maybe only turns $1.5 million, $2 million a year, and the form asks you, do the pen test, when was the last pen test and who delivered it? And you try to tell them, right, you need to find $6,000 for the pen test so you can get the $2,000 insurance. That's absolute nonsense. It's nonsense. They're taking controls and things that they would like to see from large enterprises and trying to ram them into the small business sector and the medium business sector, and that doesn't work, right? But you could sit at the table with an underwriter, and I've done this before, and come back and says, that's not relevant to this organisation, and here's why it's not. That's not relevant, and here is the controls that are put in place, and here is the likelihood of something going wrong with those, so that they understand the level of risk, because that's all the underwriter wants to get. How likely are they to actually claim from? And I truly believe that the managed service provider is the best person to put this in place. So where are we going with this? There are lots and lots of red lines that you will see the insurance providers come out with. You need multi-factor authentication and everything. You need to understand how many global admin accounts that you have in place. All things as managed service providers that we actually do. We can then use that both in two ways. We can go back to the insurance providers to feed into what's relevant for these particular sectors. Okay, open up sectors that are poorly served, like the non-profit sectors, find it quite difficult to get policies, etc. Doesn't mean they don't need security. Doesn't mean they don't have budget. Doesn't mean you wouldn't take their money to work with them. But you could open up a new avenue for them. The other side around this that you go back and update them, but it isn't happening, right? And the other thing that's not been disclosed or even asked about on the forms is the use of AI in the organisation, right? So the insurers at the minute will come back and say you didn't disclose AI, but there's no box or there's nowhere on there to ask. There's just any other information, and that's where